I got seas going right across my deck here now. I did not right up in his vicinity, but no, I didn't. So this is good too, Roger. Thanks for that information, sir, and I'll get back to you if we come up with anything. Over.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Breakers, a podcast about shipwrecks, loss, and lessons learned from maritime disasters. My name's Tanner. I'll be one of your hosts today, and I think I'll just be joined by Taylor right now.
Hi, I'm here.
We don't have any patrons, I don't think. Our patron fields lie fallow right now.
Sometimes you got to do that. You got to rotate them out. You know, if you overwork the field, just you suck all the nutrients right out.
We could just make it up. Who would know? No one's checking us on these things. But no, we have no new patrons. But we do appreciate the patrons we do have. We hope that you have been enjoying the Patreon content we've gotten out. Our next one won't have anything to do with Flanders. Probably at all, if I had to guess.
Those episodes just made me feel bad about not being able to pronounce anything.
There were some tough ones. There was a long line of tough ones in those episodes.
Well, because sometimes I feel like I was going to say it in a way that would sound funny, but it turns out that's actually the way
that's just the way it's pronounced, yeah. Well, and you're having to jump between the French and the Dutch, and then like place names in England that don't make a lot of sense how they're pronounced.
You know, I really think that if Germany could unify and maybe just take all that.
Let me stop you right there.
That.
We're trying to work the other way with Germany right now, is what we need. What have you been up to? Aside from watching The Paper Brigade.
So we had some storms roll through the other day. And yesterday evening, I got home from work and I had power and I had internet. But there were a couple down lines in my neighborhood. And by the time the evening was over, my power was out for 3 hours. And when it came back on, I didn't have internet anymore because my power company had decided to cut my internet line running out of my house. Not sure why.
What sorts of analog entertainment did you get up to while you were sans internet?
I will just say that the MLB app is a great thing, and paying $100 a year to watch the Guardians also comes with free radio broadcasts for all the games.
Yeah, I've been using that because we have the Brewers package through MLB. So I've been taking advantage of the radio stuff too.
Mm-hmm. So actually, we just ended up listening to baseball on the radio via candlelight, which isn't the worst thing in the world.
It's like the 1920s all over again.
That's what I said. Which actually transitions me into my media check-in.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
I started Pinstripe Empire by Marty Appel. It's really good. I love it. It's like reading the baseball documentary by Ken Burns, because there's just so much history in baseball and so many characters. I don't know. I could read these stories forever because it's like, you'll have a guy like Lefty Crawford went 21-10 for the Cleveland Indians in 1918. Mm-hmm. Even though his right arm didn't work after being paralyzed on the Western Front in World War I. It's like, what?
And he pitched 4,000 innings that season.
Yeah. Pitched 4,000 innings and only gave up 2 home runs the entire season.
An interesting thing that I got from that Baseball in the Garden of Eden book, that John Thorne book, is until like the live ball era, the home run was not really a integral part of the sport. And so it wasn't really something that pitchers pitched around.
Yeah.
If there were no runners on base as a pitcher, you weren't throwing your best stuff. Like strikeouts weren't the goal. Your goal was to get the batter out. And so they were preserving their arms. So like when you see guys, they started 40 games a season and they went 9 innings in all of them. Part of it is they were not wearing their arms out as much, until they really, really needed to.
Yeah, it is interesting how much the game has changed and the stats and kind of what stats are valued have changed. How nowadays you can strike out, you can lead the league of strikeouts and still win an MVP. That's pretty crazy. It's also interesting that like batting average, how much that's shifted, that like they're talking down about guys hitting 230 and 240 and stuff in the 1920s. Like that is not a good batting average. But nowadays, I feel like there's teams that have everyday players that hit sub 200.
I would love for the Brewers to consistently be hitting 240 right now. Some bleak times for the Brewers, but they've sort of for them to play as poorly as they have and still be like right around 500, I'm pretty happy with that. As fighting through all these injuries, Cherio's coming back, Vaughn is coming back, Yelich is going to be out for a bit, but yeah. So it's been a fun season. They've looked good when they've looked good. Last night they had a great Brewers small ball, just rounding the carousel type game, but yeah, when they're not scoring, it's been pretty bleak.
Yeah, the Guardians have just not been consistent on offense. Like, I think Bybee is like leads the league in lack of run support. Basically, they've scored like 4 runs for him all season. But Gavin Williams is having a great year. He pitched a 9 strikeout game today, actually. So it's been fun to watch a player that I watched in college do well in the pros.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that book, though, actually, I will say one other thing about Pinstripe Empire that I like. And everyone listening to this agrees and knows, like, the Yankees are evil. Like, you understand this as a baseball fan. Sort of like reading Ordinary Men. This kind of humanizes them and breaks it down, and you understand that they're not a monster, they're ordinary people, but they're still evil.
Well, also, like, the Yankees were one of the worst teams in the American League for like the first.
They actually really sucked for a long time.
And that's like Ban Johnson literally forced them to change ownership because he said, like, well, I did all this work to put a team in New York and you guys can't win. We need to change something up here. And that's when like Colonel Rupp gets involved?
I just got to the part where he died.
Not to spoil stuff. I guess you already did. You're probably deeper into it than I am because I've been
actually
very spotty with my reading of it.
It's been good though, but like it is cool to actually put some like human faces and stories behind like all these legendary names and things that happen. It makes it a far more interesting story rather than just being like, yeah, I hate the Yankees because the Yankees suck.
Hal Chase, I thought, was an interesting part of that because he comes up in the Ken Burns documentary. He's such a big name with several different teams, and reading about him with the Yankees was really interesting.
Yeah, it has been. What about you? What have you been up to?
I have been doing a good bit of reading, but my check-ins I've put down here are number one. Katie and I have been really enjoying DTF St. Louis.
I have seen ads for this. I have not watched it.
On HBO. It's very good. It's kind of a dramedy murder mystery.
Uh-huh.
Or is it? Haven't watched the finale yet. It's got Jason Bateman, Linda Cardellini, and David Harbour are the 3 main characters.
Hopper, if you will.
Yes. And it's very good. It's structured very interestingly. It's very non-linear. You'll see a part and then it'll be a flashback, and next episode it'll have the same part again, but you'll see a little bit more of it before to set up the context. It's very cool. We've really enjoyed it. We have one more episode to go.
Nice. I was thinking about checking that out, so hearing a positive review will definitely make me want to check it out even more.
But the coolest thing I've watched recently was on National Geographic, or from National Geographic.
This is what you were texting me about last night.
I was texting everyone. I was posting about it. I was live tweeting it with screenshots. Secrets of the Bee is a very cool 2-part documentary that basically goes through the life cycle and kind of day-to-day existence of different types of bees.
Is it narrated by Jerry Seinfeld?
It's narrated by Bertie Gregory is his name. But it was very cool. I go through phases where I get really into bugs, insects, and arachnids and stuff. And this hit at just the right moment. I think it was just released like a couple weeks ago. Obviously, really amazing footage because it's National Geographic. And like a lot of different types of bees outside your kind of standard fare honey and bumble types. Vulture bees, I didn't know about those.
I've never heard of that.
They eat, in the show, they're eating like a rotting fish and they're fighting off all of the other various insects for it. Lots of cool different types of bees. I think with the nature documentaries, on the more classic animals of interest, your lions and your gazelles and your tigers and penguins and things like that, you sort of, I don't know, you sort of have to like control your desire to humanize them.
Mm-hmm.
As much as you want the gazelle to get away from the lion, it's like, well, that means the baby lions don't eat.
Yeah, I always love that in those documentaries. Like, you'll be with this lion family for a while, and then like it'll show a gazelle, and you're like, oh no.
You can't conceive of those as like the way that you would human relationships. It's just it's not a useful way to interact with the animal world. But I think with like your less broadly appealing creatures, mainly insects and related things, bees and ants and spiders and stuff, I think a little bit of that humanization is probably good because
they're easy to kill. Like if you find one in your house, you're killing it.
You kind of need to build that appeal for people of like, what is it? Why shouldn't I kill this thing?
Mm-hmm.
Even just like, why shouldn't I be afraid of this thing? Or why shouldn't this thing make me uncomfortable?
I feel like I've gotten a lot better about that with like spiders, especially if I see one in the garage or something. I'm like, you know what? As long as you stay out here and don't come in my house, you're probably doing more good than harm, like eating all the bugs you eat. Like trying to like let nature run its course a little more.
It's like you said, it's like they're so easy to kill because they're different.
Mm-hmm.
Centipedes make me extremely uncomfortable, but I have gotten a little bit better at not smashing them, when I see one. Because, they do useful things. Not that the value of life is tied to one's usefulness, but it was really good. And the documentary does, some of that, playing with the ideas of, like these bees as a family, brothers and sisters and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It picks one bee at the beginning and labels it B1. It kind of follows it, and you kind of get attached to the bee, and you shouldn't get attached to the bee.
Anything.
Don't get attached to the bee.
Like when you're playing a game and you start naming your units and stuff, and you got a unit that just keeps getting promoted and you name it, whatever it is you want to name it, you can become attached to that unit.
So yeah, it was really great. It was really well done. It's 2 parts, so it's like about 2 hours total. It's very good.
I'll have to check that out.
Okay, but we are here to talk about a ship, a wreck, a shipwreck.
That is the thing we talk about here.
So our main character today is the general cargo vessel Rema.
Okay.
Possibly Rema. I've been saying Rema in my head. This is one where our main and basically only source is the MAIB investigation report on the incident. I could not find anything else about this, but the report is very detailed, and the MAIB reports tend to, I feel like, give a bit deeper look at like the context and the people.
Yeah, rather than like the Coast Guard reports and stuff from America.
NTSB reports are very impersonal to the point that like they don't even use names in the ones I've seen. They just label, Midshipman 1. It's quite a detailed report that I've, tried to pull the useful stuff out of. So let's talk about Rema here. So Rema was built in the Netherlands in 1975, originally under the name Fievel.
Fievel goes west.
In our episode, Fievel's going to go east.
Back to where Fievel came from. Back to the Cossack cats.
Back to the Okrana.
Fievel becomes a settler in the West Bank.
There's probably a timeline where that happens. In terms of size, so this is not a very big vessel we're talking about here. Measured 59.5 meters in length, or 195 feet, with a beam measurement of 9.4 meters, or 30.8 feet. So a relatively small general cargo vessel.
So is she like kind of like a coastal or like local trading vessel? Like she's not necessarily always doing like cross Atlantic voyages.
She's basically making jumps across the Channel or across the North Sea.
Okay.
So actually, we're going to be kind of in the same area we were for the John Crabbe episode.
Okay. It's always nice when we can repeat.
With fewer pirates. So according to the report, she worked for a, quote, number of years until being laid up by her original owners while they looked for someone who would buy the vessel. And this happened in December 1995, when Fievel was purchased by Herbert Trading Limited, operating out of Nassau in the Bahamas.
That type of vessel, I feel like would kind of make sense somewhere like the Bahamas, where, especially if we're going to keep it in that general area, there's a lot of island hopping.
Well, they're not going to use her in the Bahamas, importantly.
Oh, okay.
Like many of these companies, they're headquartered, in the Bahamas, in, Bermuda, places like that. They're not operating there. So for the sale to go through, she was dry docked and put through a series of repairs. These repairs are all pretty routine, wear and tear type maintenance. For example, Some of her plating was renewed in the areas with the greatest thickness loss.
Mm-hmm.
You never want to be losing thickness. It does happen with age.
That's why you take those pills to keep your hair.
That's why I take those Frank Thomas pills. There were some cracked shells in the cargo hold shell framing that were repaired. Her anchor chains were inspected and found acceptable. Her propellers were removed and repaired. One blade tip was straightened and 2 tips were built up by welding.
Interesting.
Hatch covers and ventilation closures were tested, and at least 1 watertight door was repaired. So, I mean, nothing major here. All pretty basic stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like normal wear and tear type stuff.
Along with the change of ownership came her name change, changed to Rema, as this episode is titled. Her registry was also changed from the Netherlands to Honduras. Under her new ownership arrangement, Halcyon Shipping Limited acted as her exclusive chartering broker. Essentially, this just means Halcyon is responsible for arranging cargoes, dealing with port agents, collecting payments, setting voyage costs, all of the sort of administrative type stuff on the money side of things.
That makes sense.
Whereas the owner / master of the vessel was responsible for the maintenance, manning, surveys, certification, and insurance.
That's interesting. It's almost like an independent contractor, like you would see in trucking, where
it basically is. He's like doing the hiring, he's doing the training, the onboarding. He's basically doing like the HR type stuff, as he's also the captain of the vessel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting way of doing things for this. I don't know that I've ever heard of that.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be quite common.
Super common, but
with these like smaller vessels, I assume.
Yeah, and that actually would make sense. That a lot of bigger companies, it probably doesn't make sense for them to operate a vessel this small. Whereas, one person owning it, they can probably squeeze out some money, especially if they're not having to book and find loads. They're just doing the actual moving part of it.
With a vessel this small, the margins are probably pretty slim. I mean, this is going to be a no loads refused situation for sure.
I would think.
So for all of 1996, Rema operated without incident, with her annual classification survey scheduled for December of that year. These surveys of her hull and machinery were completed by January of 1997. At this time, her registry was again changed, this time from Honduras to Belize.
Interesting.
However, the change of registry may have brought some bad luck with it. In March of 97, Rema had an incident in Bremerhaven, Germany, where she lost all of her electrical power and steering, colliding with a bridge. I was looking at a map of Bremerhaven. I'm assuming this is the bridge south of Bremerhaven across the Weser.
It's a dangerous situation. That's literally what happened in Baltimore.
With a much smaller ship, fortunately.
Yeah, in this case, a much smaller ship.
The report says that it happened specifically in Blexen, which is a borough of Bremerhaven, but I don't see a bridge that's specifically located there. So I don't know what it hit, if that's where it happened. Unless that was just like its closest reported location. Rema was surveyed in Bremerhaven after this incident, with damage being found to her forecastle deck, bulwark, forepeak internal structure, and windlass hydraulic system.
So she hit it pretty good.
She got a good lick on it. This resulted in her being detained, is what that's supposed to say, by the Port Authority, with temporary repairs conducted on site and arrangements made for permanent repairs to be completed in the UK by the end of April. I've got a quote here that you can read from the report.
These repairs were organized by the master and carried out by himself, the crew, and self-employed workers. Materials such as steel plate, etc., were bought direct from steel suppliers by the master. On April 23rd, a surveyor surveyed the repairs and confirmed that they had been completed to his satisfaction. A class certificate was then issued. This feels a little old-timey in a way of like the steamboats on the Mississippi, of a captain just finding someone to like, hey, come repair my boat. Like, I don't think that's how Maersk is doing it.
That tends to be what happens, because later in the analysis part, it does say that it's hard to totally track the maintenance history of this vessel, because it's not the kind of thing that was being reported up through a corporate ladder. There's no real log of some of these things. It was more, this thing's broken, find a guy to fix it, and pay him, I don't know, presumably in cash. just to get it fixed. The next incident of note on Rema's record came in March of 1998, when she struck a service jetty at Kedby on the River Trent. The resulting damage to Rema was able to be repaired by the crew on their own with no need for a major stoppage of service.
It is, I don't know, it is weird to me the crew keeps doing all the repair work.
Having read a good number of maritime accident investigation reports now, in the past 6 or so years, one thing that stood out about this one was the number of times Rema had undergone inspection.
Mm-hmm.
In the roughly 18 months leading up to the incident we're discussing today, Rema was put through unscheduled inspections in various ports 8 different times.
That's pretty crazy. I feel like in a lot of these, you'll see like somehow it hasn't been inspected in 15 years.
Right. So no issues there. She got inspected a lot. And we'll talk about why. This is not just bad luck with these. This is I guess this is more like when a baseball player has like a 4 home run game and then gets randomly drug tested after.
Uh-huh.
So this is largely due to her being registered in Belize. Racist, right?
Or it could just be some lax shipping standards.
So this is due to her being registered in Belize, and how certain registrations are considered under the Paris Memorandum of Understanding on Port State Control. This Memorandum of Understanding, the Paris MOU, it's intended to raise standards for international shipping and prevent laxity of safety and maintenance for ships entering European ports. This is an agreement. It's signed by various EU and non-EU countries. It doesn't really establish new stuff. It's really just an agreement to adhere to already existing conventions, like SOLAS, MARPOL, all of those type of acronym conventions. There are other MOUs for different regions. So there's like a Tokyo MOU for East Asia. There's an Indian Ocean MOU, a Caribbean MOU. There's a Black Sea MOU. And so if you had to guess one major shipping country that is not signatory to any of these MOUs...
Are we considered a major shipping country?
We are.
Okay. I know how much America loves to sign international agreements of understanding.
Yep. We are not a signatory to any of these MOUs.
And that's how we keep our freedom.
Again, I think a shipping person would probably be able to better say, like, how important is that really? I mean, like, those conventions still exist regardless.
They're about to get more important if we get rid of the Jones Act.
The way this country's going, it's we're going to be signing something more like the Jim Jones Act. So under the Paris MOU, countries agree to inspect 25% of foreign flagged vessels entering their ports each year. These inspections are unscheduled, but not random.
That sounds like the directive to most major police departments about how and who they stop.
So quoting here from the report.
Under a European directive, certain categories of ships are targeted for priority of inspections. These are passenger ships, ships visiting the MOU region for the first time or after an absence of 12 months or more, older ships with special hazard such as oil, gas, and chemical tankers, ships classed with non-EU recognized classification societies, and ships registered with certain flags.
One of these certain flags is Belize, actually ranking number 4 on the list of vessel detentions at the time of the report's publication.
Do you know who number 1 is?
I don't, but I would assume it's probably another Caribbean or Central American country. Just because the nature of, I don't know, registry. Or, I mean, it easily could be like Liberia or something.
I was going to say, isn't Liberia another one that's kind of notorious for...
I mean, just because so many ships are registered there, that could be it too. Of Rema's 8 inspections, 3 came up deficiency-free, all of these in the Netherlands, 2 in Rotterdam and 1 in Vlaardingen. An inspection in Plymouth in August 1996 found multiple deficiencies, but none serious enough to warrant detention.
I'm picturing the British inspector, with the most British accent, pointing and telling them what they've done wrong.
He's wearing a tricorn hat. So it's a bit like a driver's test where you can get dinged, you can get some points taken off, but as long as there's nothing major, they're not going to detain your vessel. This Plymouth inspection, 2 life buoy smoke signals needed to be replaced. Fore and aft anchor lights needed repair, and there was a faulty watch-keeping receiver. 2 other inspections in Hartlepool and Amsterdam in the summer of 97 found single deficiencies, but Rema was not detained in either of these cases. On 2 occasions, these unscheduled inspections yielded serious enough deficiencies to warrant Rema being detained in port until they could be fixed. At Bremerhaven in March 97, Rema was detained due to deficiencies in the following areas:
Hull damage impairing seaworthiness.
railing catwalks,
Ventilator air pipes.
anchoring devices,
Musters and drills.
minimum safe manning certificate,
Charts.
auxiliary engines,
Steering gear.
certificates of competency.
That's a lot of things.
A lot of things, and some of them quite serious.
I mean, the whole, like, kicking it off with hull damage impairing seaworthiness, I feel like that's a big one.
That's a big one. That's kind of a non-starter if your hull is unseaworthy. The drills is a bit concerning.
I just looked down to the next one we're going to read.
Oh, yeah, there's more. There's more.
Steering gear also seems important.
Mm-hmm.
Charts. I don't know how you don't have charts on a professional vessel.
I think the issue is more that the charts were like outdated.
Outdated. It's like having an expired license.
These charts are so outdated, it still shows Sluys on the North Sea coast.
It has like Poseidon and mermaids drawn in like different corners.
It says "Here be dragons" where North America is supposed to be. Rema's second stint in detention, he's like a troublemaking student, came at the Scottish port of Montrose on the North Sea. This would also prove to be her final inspection that she ever got. And it found the following issues.
No lifeboats on board.
Captain unable to show certificate of competency.
No evidence to show that 2 qualified radio operators were on board.
Charts and nautical publications out of date.
Fire hose leaking.
No fixed firefighting system in paint locker.
One thing that I wonder about is like, okay, was this the first time there was no firefighting system in the paint locker? Or was this just the first time they got around to finding it?
That is a great question that the report does address.
Because like I feel like something like that was probably there the last time.
No lifeboats. You don't like just suddenly not have them between port visits. What happened to them?
What happened to your lifeboats? Buy some new charts too.
Your captain doesn't suddenly not have a certificate of competency. So all of these were in contravention of either the Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea or the International Convention on Standards of Training, Certification, and Watchkeeping for Seafarers. Rema's detention at Montrose lasted 5 days.
I'm assuming they're fixing these things in those 5 days?
Or trying to.
You got a lifeboat guy you got to call? Like, where do you even find that?
Today, you could just like Amazon Prime a lifeboat, probably. So during this time, while the boat is in detention, the lead Marine Safety Agency investigator raised some concerns about the status of life-saving appliances on board the vessel, as well as the legality of the certificates of competency for the ship's master and mate.
Well, that's not good.
So I kind of get the sense that now that like it's being detained, he has time to like look into some of this stuff, maybe make some phone calls and say like, is this real? Is this authentic?
Not that it matters, and I guess in some ways it does. Where's this captain from?
I think he is some kind of British.
Okay, so
I feel like the name is in the report somewhere, and I forget what it is.
Some kind of British.
So that lead investigator at Montrose, like you listening probably, wondered how the ship had passed her annual inspection and had been issued her renewed safety certificate the previous month by a Germanischer Lloyd surveyor.
Yeah, if it's only been a month, I shouldn't be finding like out of service things if you just got inspected.
Surely she did not lose all these things in the course of a month.
Right.
So, for example, under Solus, Rema should have carried 2 lifeboats. Again, she had 0 lifeboats. Alternatively, she could have carried an equivalent arrangement of 2 life rafts and an MOB rescue craft, a man overboard boat. There were no lifeboats on board and no evidence provided of any acceptable equivalent arrangement.
How did that happen, though? Like, how does it go from that not being an issue on an inspection to that being an issue? I don't understand that.
Well, you do have to be inspecting them to find these things. So the Marine Safety Agency requested Germanischer Lloyd to provide the evidence that they had used to verify her compliance with the safety conventions.
GL said that the vessel was built in 1975. The survey and safety certification was carried out by the Flag State Authority of the Netherlands, which accepted the MOB rescue craft and 2 lifeboats as equivalent to 2 lifeboats. This arrangement was published as an IMO Circular number 20, dated May 28, 1982. Equivalent arrangement accepted under Regulations 5 of Chapter 1. Since the Netherlands and then Honduras had accepted the LSA arrangement, GL judged that the arrangement was still acceptable under the Belize flag, and therefore satisfactory for the issue of the safety equipment certificate.
So right away, if you're kind of piecing together what we've covered so far, it sort of appears like this thing is passing inspections because it passed the previous inspection.
Yeah, that's definitely what it seems like.
And if you trace it all back to the Belize, like her initial inspection and registration, this is a flag that, you know, under the Paris MOU, they already don't trust, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So it sort of calls into question the whole process. So in terms of what was actually deficient about Rema's setup, so she did have a man overboard boat, but its manner of storage and deployment was considered unsatisfactory by the surveyor at Montrose. The boat was stored on the poop and had to be physically manhandled into launching position, where it would be deployed by a manpower drive winch with no slewing arrangement. So it's not being like turned out to be deployed. Like you have to literally just haul it and then like toss it overboard.
Yeah, that doesn't seem very efficient in a situation where the waves are turning minutes to hours.
In a situation where you need it.
Uh-huh.
So the surveyor was of the opinion that this could only be a temporary setup and that a satisfactory system would need to be put in place. At the master's request, a lifeboat exemption certificate was issued by the authorities in Belize with 2 conditions. That's a terrible sounding thing, a lifeboat exemption certificate.
It really doesn't feel like that's something that should exist.
Rema, so these 2 conditions were Rema would not travel more than 100 miles from the nearest land.
Okay.
Which still, like, isn't 90 miles still, like, way, way too far if you don't have any lifeboats?
What's the difference between 20 and 100, right?
It's just insane. It's like, well, that's probably fine. Life rafts must be positioned on each side of the vessel, sufficient to accommodate the entire crew, and an approved boat must be carried on board in case of a man overboard. Again, but with their current setup, if you fall overboard, it's going to take them, like, I don't know, 20 minutes to get the boat. Like
longer than you'd like.
But the lifeboat situation was really only one of the surveyor's main concerns. That's more of a tactical concern. He has some strategic level concerns as well. With the certification of the master and mate. So this is quoting from the report.
The master held a Belize license for Master Limited to 1,600 gross tons, issued on the strength of a Honduras license. The mate was issued with a similar license because of a document issued by Panama stating that he had paid his exam fees and was entitled to be examined. The MSA surveyor felt that these certificates failed to meet the STCW convention requirements because licenses cannot be issued on either the basis of sea service alone or eligibility for an examination.
I read this as like, you could sign up to take the LSAT, so you're a lawyer, basically.
Well, it's like you could take your driving test, but why? I can just drive.
Both of these they're finding to be inadequate, saying this type of license should not be issued just on basis of service, and not just because you're eligible to take the exam.
That's the whole point of the exam.
Yeah, that's what the exam's for. The Belize authorities confirmed that they had issued certificates to both the master and mate, So that's kind of that kind of ends things there, saying, well, we did issue the license. We did issue the certificates. Why they decided to do that is not something that this surveyor really has any authority over. So they have been issued. So, they're accepted. That's accepted by the MSA surveyor. And so that actually rectified one of those deficiencies about the lack of qualified radio operators on board. So by nature of these being, authenticated, okay, this qualifies them as radio operators. Again, probably doesn't assuage the MSA surveyor's concerns much.
I'd feel a lot better if they passed a test to tell me that they knew how to use the radio.
But he's checking off his boxes. He is covering his ass. This is all above my pay grade. I'm doing my job. The remaining deficiencies were satisfactorily resolved, and Rema was released from detention at Montrose.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of that, if an inspector took every vessel out of service that he could, there'd be no vessels. So I can kind of see where it's it says he has this shit together, so sure, why not?
That can't be your problem. You have so much other stuff to do.
Yeah, I can't change that, so good for you.
All right, so moving into the incident portion. At 1500 hours on Wednesday, April 22nd, 1998, Rema began loading what would be her final cargo at Berwick in Scotland, where we spent some time in our most recent bonus episode.
We did. We spent some quality time there in Berwick.
We saw some sieges of Berwick, some counter sieges of Berwick.
Betrayal in Berwick.
So her cargo is 440 tons of 2 to 5 millimeter hardened redstone clippings and 572.5 tons of 5 to 8 millimeter hardened redstone clippings. So just these it's just rocks.
Landscaping rock almost.
Yeah, I assume I don't know what it's for, but it's something like that. Before loading began, Rema's hold was inspected and found to be clean, free from extraneous matter, suitable for the transportation of hardened redstone clippings. And this is something that's actually mentioned in the report, is that Rema actually had a reputation for cleanliness. Her hull or her hold had a very positive reputation. Shippers would request her explicitly because they knew this about the vessel. Despite what we were saying about some of the questionableness in those inspections, in terms of day-to-day operations, at least on the customer service side, she got the job done quite effectively.
Mm-hmm. You have a lot of time to clean when you don't have to maintain the lifeboats.
That's two less things you have to clean. So the loading took place from 1500 to 1700 hours on Wednesday, April 22nd, and from 700 to 11:15 the following day, Thursday, April 23rd. From the investigation report.
Having been informed that loading was complete and that high water was at 12:46, the vessel's agent visited the ship during the morning, expecting the master would wish to sail at noon. While he was discussing this with the master, they were joined by the mate, who said they had a mechanical problem and an oil seal needed to be renewed. With the necessary repair time unknown, the master decided to delay his departure until the following day. The agent asked the master whether he would consider sailing on the next high tide at midnight, but was told that because there was plenty of time in hand before Brennan needed to be at Terneuzen for a Monday morning discharge, there was no pressing requirement to sail earlier.
So really one of our rare cases for these where the captain's no rush.
Yeah, despite some questionable qualifications, the crew seems pretty decent.
This is not one that happens because, someone's in too big of a hurry. Also, I don't know why oil seal is in quotes in that.
Yeah, no, it makes it seem like he's making something up. In front of the guy.
Oil seal. She departed Berwick for Terneuzen in the Netherlands around 12:30 the following day, Friday, April 24th, with a crew of 4.
Wow, that's really small.
It is, maybe too small.
I guess I hadn't thought about that.
So when Rema arrived at Berwick, there had actually been a 5th member of the crew aboard, a junior deckhand, who left the vessel on Thursday to return home. It just says for personal reasons. There was another occupant who had departed the ship at Berwick, and this was the master's 11-year-old son, saving ourselves at least some tragedy here.
Yeah.
After the departure of the Berwick harbor pilot, Rema was out to sea by 1300 hours, bound for the Netherlands. I think I do mention it later in the analysis portion, but she is supposed to have 5 crew.
And she's sailing with 4?
Yes, she is. She is, based on her certification, supposed to have 5. At 3:21 the following morning, so this is Saturday the 25th, an incomplete Mayday call was picked up on Channel 16. In this call, Mayday was repeated 3 times, the call sign 2 times, and the vessel's position was relayed once. This was 54 degrees 42 minutes north, 0 degrees 8 minutes west.
I feel like they're already doing better than a lot of vessels, though. Like they're at least getting a Mayday call out and like their position and stuff like that. Like,
yeah, I mean, that contributes a lot to the fact that anyone knows that this has happened. Because so often they just disappear, and no.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of this. Is it the Scottish fishing vessel that we were just talking about a few weeks ago? Literally disappears. No one knows
exactly
until it's found later.
So the reason this is incomplete. The call did not include any information about the nature of the emergency, the condition of the vessel, or the status of those on board. All things that you would include, if you had time to include all of that in a Mayday call. The call had been received by the Humber Coast Guard substation and immediately responded to, but no more was heard from Rema. That reported position placed Rema about 21 nautical miles northeast of Whitby. I'm actually also reading Dracula right now, so Whitby is a big part of that. So they know that they're looking for a vessel that is having some sort of emergency. The Coast Guard relayed the Mayday call to other vessels in the area, ultimately enlisting the aid of 3 RNLI lifeboats from Whitby, Scarborough, and Teesside, which spent a combined total of 32 hours on the search, 2 RAF rescue helicopters, an MPCU aircraft. MPCU, I believe, stands for the Marine Pollution Control Unit.
Interesting.
So enlisting some aid there. And then there were 4 other vessels that were not search and rescue vessels. This is the MV Bicanus, the Rolf Buck, Sidstrom, and Asperity. They all spent a total of 19 hours combined looking for this vessel.
That's a lot of resources being brought into somewhere, especially when you have a position like that. You would think that they would find something.
With the surface search yielding no results, the Trinity House vessel Patricia was also dispatched to the search area. And Patricia began her search just after 9:30 in the morning on April 26th, using a Simrad SQ-270 sonar and a Simrad EA500 hydrographic echo sounder. No sign of wreckage was found at the originally reported Mayday coordinates, so the search was expanded towards a position where oil had been reported coming to the surface. Just before 2:30 in the afternoon on the 26th, the wreck was located with the echo sounder. Follow-up operations the following day confirmed the wreck's position at 54 degrees 41 minutes north, 0 degrees 8 minutes west. Clearance over the wreck was found to be 44.6 meters, and the seabed at this location consisted of sand and seashells. Once the wreck's location had been confirmed, a closer search was conducted using an ROV from the vessel Goosander.
I don't know why the name's funny to me.
It's a funny name. Rema was sitting at a depth of 60 to 65 meters. And so this ROV survey does not happen immediately. This can't actually be done until June 23rd. So this is about, 2 months after? But it revealed that Rema's cargo had emptied from her hold and was dispersed beneath and around the wreckage, with the majority of the spread to the starboard side, some as much as 75 meters away.
That's not good.
Cargo's supposed to be inside.
Why is it outside the vessel?
Why are the police outside? It's a Derek comedy reference for,
that is.
For people who were in high school in 2007. So the wreck survey findings. So Rema's port side showed only superficial damage. Her starboard side showed slightly more, including 1 broken porthole near the stern. The stern showed some damage to her hull plating and damage to all 4 propellers, while the rudder appeared undamaged. The serious damage was at the bow.
The top of the stem had been pushed backwards to crush the forward forecastle bulwark and to form the hull plating on both sides of the stem and the forecastle deck. Quantities of mud and cargo were visible right forward on the forecastle deck, with further large deposits of mud on the upper side of the starboard anchor. Both forepeak storeroom hatches had collapsed inward, with a remote winch control lying on the deck by the port access hatch.
Oh, and I guess I should have mentioned, so she is sitting, like, upright. She is sitting with her keel down.
The way a ship should look.
Yes. Which actually does make the ROV survey kind of difficult because, if she, say, flooded, it's hard to see the bottom of her hull. So you can't really find a lot. All of Rema's 14 hatch covers were still on board the vessel, although many of them were damaged and some entirely displaced from their corresponding hatch. The ROV was able to enter the hold through hatch number 1 and through a gap between hatch 13 and 14. Rema does have just one single hold. And I'm not actually sure how that works because she had the 2 different types of cargo. So I don't know if there's like a screen that's dividing them or what.
They probably have like temporary ways to section it off or something, depending on what they're carrying.
There was only a small amount of cargo still inside the hold, and this covered about 2 square meters, 1 meter deep, pushed against the starboard forward bulkhead of the hull. Like if someone had picked up the boat and tipped it forward and shaken everything out. There was also significant damage to the wheelhouse.
The top center section of the wheelhouse, 6 millimeter thick aluminum.
We're in Britain. Aluminium.
Was crushed downwards so that it had forced the front of the wheelhouse inward and forward. The deckhead in the... Didn't mean to speak with a New Zealand accent there.
I had coffee in my mouth when you said that. And this is one that I copied and pasted from the report, so I didn't actually read every word. Dickhead.
The deckhead in the wheelhouse had collapsed, preventing any survey of the interior or examination of the wheelhouse controls. The starboard wheelhouse door was shut, with the port one only slightly open. It was not possible to open these doors. A number of windows in the wheelhouse front were missing, with side and rear wheelhouse windows intact.
The portside life raft was missing from the ship, and the launch gate was open. The starboard raft was released, but jammed against a guardrail. So it had come out, but it was stuck near where it was launched.
So it's reasonable to think that they tried to launch lifeboats?
I believe these had some sort of automatic release.
Okay.
The starboard door to the galley was open, but the frame was collapsed and the galley was inaccessible. So there's some pretty serious damage to the superstructure of the ship.
Yeah, I feel like whatever, it had to hit something or get hit by something very hard.
And also the door to the paint locker was open. The aft accommodation door was also open. The ROV was able to enter the accommodation, but unable to make much progress due to scattered debris, collapsed bulkheads, and poor visibility. Despite Rema's previous detentions, none of those had been for reasons of structural soundness. There's no real clue as to what sort of problem might have sunk her. Obviously, they look into, did she collide with another vessel? There's no other reports of that. There's no 100% verified instances that any vessel actually saw her as she was on her voyage. Between leaving Barrack and the Mayday call, there is literally no communication with the outside world. So they know almost nothing about what route she was taking or anything like that. There's also no voyage data recorder on board. So a lot of the things that they might use in, say, a larger vessel, they don't have any of that to deal with here. We mentioned that before leaving Barrack, one of the crew members had left the ship to return home. This did bring the vessel's crew total down to 4 in violation of her safe manning certificate issued on February 19th, 1998.
I'm assuming the captain felt a little pressure to sail since he'd already waited a day and had told the guy they were...
There's not a lot of details there. I don't know if that crew member was expected back or what. So that's noted in the first section of the report's analysis section. The report, however, does not attribute any part of the sinking to being short of a crew member. I mean, it's kind of hard to say yes or no because like we simply don't know enough about what happened to her.
Right.
But there's at least no positive evidence that yes, she sank because she didn't have enough crew. This isn't a case like some of the ones we've seen where like, you only have one guy on the bridge or something like that.
Yeah, because the other one's making noodles.
Yeah, you got to make the noodles. So an assessment of the damaged portions of the vessel all pointed towards a rapid foundering of the ship and a strong, nearly vertical impact with the seabed. Like with all of this collapse damage, all of this implosion damage, like this happened pretty quickly and pretty directly into the seabed.
Is this something where she's leaking, and then hits the tipping point where she just goes under?
That's kind of how they lean here. So while the launch gates for both life rafts were open, these were assessed as likely the result of the rapid sinking. Oh, that's what it was. So they think that those just came open because of the force with which she was going under.
Yeah, I mean, to me, my first thought is like lost. Like if they think they're losing buoyancy, they'd be able to tell, and at some point you just lose it all.
So the EPIRB unit on board, they did have one, but it didn't float free as designed. They were kind of unable to assess why this happened. Again, it could be a function of it sank too fast, and I don't know, it got jammed somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
The EPIRB wasn't registered to Rema with the Coast Guard. I assume it still gives out a signal.
I would think.
So, like, if you're looking for one in a certain area, I assume it would still be helpful.
Yeah, because like, who's going to randomly have that?
Yeah, so I assume it just maybe doesn't tell you all the information. Deformation damage to the stern of the vessel and in the wheelhouse were consistent with implosion damage from the rapid increase in pressure from the sinking. And yeah, I think, what did we say? She was like 60 meters down?
Yeah.
So she's almost 200 feet down. So pressure would be, significant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Video analysis of the wreckage didn't reveal any clear sign of penetration or damage that would have flooded Rema's hold. Flooding calculations, there's quite a few of them. There's a whole like appendix to the report devoted to these.
Mm-hmm.
I did not read it. But they assessed that the hold would necessarily have needed to flood in order to pull Rema under. So basically assessing, there's no combination of the weight of her cargo and flooding ballast tanks that would have done this. It had to have been at least partially because of the hold flooding with water.
Mm-hmm.
All evidence indicates that she went down by the bow. There's that massive impact damage to the bow. The damage to the stern presumably happened as she settled and her back half hit the seabed.
Yeah, that would make sense with the damage.
So several possibilities and combinations were analyzed, with the most likely case being that the hold flooded due to a ruptured double bottom ballast tank. I mean, you can see diagrams of these. I mean, a lot of our listeners are probably familiar with what this looks like, where you have this, double bottom to the vessel, where underneath, say, the hold, you have these ballast tanks. The report did engage with allegations that the ship had been intentionally sunk by her own captain or crew.
Sure, why not? It's like a conspiracy, a little insurance fraud.
I feel like this is the kind of thing that the MAIB reports would include, but I don't think an NTSB report, I don't think I've ever seen something like that, where it, includes like alleged things like this. So these were fairly quickly dealt with. The allegations appeared to be based on two events. I'm just reading from the report here. Immediately prior to Rema leaving Berwick upon Tweed, the master sent the vessel logbook together with other papers to his current address in Castleford. He addressed them to himself. The day after the vessel was lost, the wife of one of the crew members is reported to have told his mother-in-law that she was not to worry as he would be home later that day. When asked why she said that, she was reported to have said that she had been told that it was planned to sink the vessel at some time in the future at a suitable time and location. She had been told this during a telephone conversation with her husband before Rema sailed. So...
Interesting.
So I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of hard to. I think it's hard to add a lot of weight to that. When it is one, it's uncorroborated, and I mean, like, I feel like if you're that spouse, you might want to cling to the possibility that your husband's alive.
I'm going to ratchet it up one more. What if it's a failed attempt at insurance fraud?
What if they tried to do that, but they sunk it too hard?
And the lifeboats weren't working because they weren't, being inspected properly or
That's
existing
true.
sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, any possibilities there. Obviously, the report does not look much further into that. It does, debunk those.
Have you thought about a NATO submarine being involved?
I thought about it. I always think about it. But no, that doesn't seem to be the case either.
Just checking. Never want to leave that stone unturned.
So in terms of findings from the investigation, like we said, she did not have any sort of voyage data recorder. That's the kind of thing that would be extremely helpful, but it's not something she was required to have. It's generally accepted that yes, flooding caused this to sink. She didn't hit something, anything like that. The only real question is where this would have come from.
Right. Like where did the flooding come from?
The report pretty thoroughly goes through and looks at, 8 possibilities, and it rejects them on XYZ reasons, leaving basically 2 possibilities: flooding through a crack in the hull side plating, or the rupture of her double bottom tank and broken or corroded air pipe or pipes in the hold. So somehow water is getting through both layers of the bottom of her hull. There's a combination of things. If she strikes bottom at some point and ruptures, those ballast tanks, that alone wouldn't sink the ship. But, if that's working in tandem with, a lack of maintenance on the top of those double bottom tanks, there could potentially be, free communication between the hold and those.
I think it's interesting that they don't ever mention hatch covers. I feel like I'm so conditioned from Great Lakes shipwrecks that something like this would be like, oh, it had to be the hatch covers.
I think from them looking at it, I think one of the other interesting things is saying, how would this happen? How would she flood so much and them not be able to make a mayday call until right when she's at the tipping point? And I think we see stuff like that in the Great Lakes as well, where when you have these single hold vessels, they're going to flood fairly evenly. It might not be noticeable that it's listing to one side or another.
Yeah, I mean, it quite literally it floats until it doesn't. It just takes a wave and doesn't come back. I mean, why did the Edmund Fitzgerald broadcast a mayday call? That's why.
Yeah, we kind of have a similar type situation here where they can, kind of give best possible guess, but there's really not enough evidence to really say either way definitively. Kind of like the Edmund Fitzgerald. So into the conclusions section, there's a lot of these. I've circled a few, I think, of the most salient ones. So what they are able to establish: Rema was seaworthy on departure from Berwick-upon-Tweed with all certificates valid and a reported draft of 3.3 meters. There is a bit of a question raised in the report because I believe this is the number that's reported to the pilot by the captain.
Mm-hmm.
But a question is raised about, was the captain reporting her average draft or her maximum draft? Because obviously, to the pilot, that would make a difference.
Right.
Saying if that was her average draft, then she was overloaded. If that was her maximum draft, then I don't think so. Again, it's a small question in the grand scheme of things, but it is one of the sort of unresolved things in the report.
Mm-hmm.
The stern and bow damage seen during the ROV survey was not the result of a collision with another vessel or object. During the process of plunging and before settling on the seabed, the cargo of stone chippings had fallen out of the hold through the forward end of the hatch covers to settle underneath and around Rema's final resting place. I guess I am a bit confused. I don't quite understand how so much of her cargo spilled out in the way it did.
Right, like if the hatch covers weren't fully ripped off.
Yeah, and so I'm still a bit unclear about that. But again, she is going fairly deep, so there is, a good amount of time for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
The estimated maximum survival time, given the temperature of the seawater in the area of the foundering, was 3 hours. Like, there's no way of knowing that anyone got off the ship. The one life raft was gone, but whether that was even launched intentionally is kind of unclear.
Mm-hmm.
The position of the hatch covers shows the vessel did not capsize. The weather conditions likely to be experienced by Rema during the early morning of April 25th were southwest force 3 to 4, sea slight, and good visibility, but with no appreciable moonlight.
So really not really treacherous conditions, I suppose.
Nothing that would indicate that the conditions sank her.
I guess that's another reason why you're not talking about hatch covers then, potentially. Like, you're not really taking water over the deck.
Yeah, that's not really a concern here. That Rema flooded without the crew being aware of the situation suggests it occurred slowly until either the bow began to submerge or the watchkeeper's attention was drawn to the vessel's sluggish response. She's fine until she isn't, in one of these scenarios. And I assume depending on how much or how little maneuvering you're doing, you might not notice that she's failing to respond.
Yeah, and depending on who you are, like if you're the captain, you might notice something before someone else if you're the one.
Yeah, and I know at least one of the crew, I believe this was his very first time at sea. One of those kind of overarching issues is the concerns about, is the captain even qualified for this? Is the mate qualified? It seems like the crew almost certainly were not. I mean, there's tons of questions here. Calculations show that Rema required 769 tons of water in the hold to have foundered while carrying a cargo of stone chippings and with empty ballast tanks. Clean cargo discharges over the years, including discharge of malt at Bucky between 19 and 21 April, show that the master maintained the hold and hatch covers in a good, clean, and watertight condition. So again, like we said, like she has a good reputation for, cleanliness and organization. So I guess it would be a bit surprising based on that record if something like the maintenance of those, the top of those tanks was allowed to be that lax. I mean, if that's not something that is a priority or even really being thought about, that's a possibility. Okay, there's a list of rejected possibilities here. And like we said, those kind of two acceptable possible causes of this, with the most likely cause being that, a rupture of her bottom tank, and then some other thing had to happen. Some other thing had to go wrong. Like we say, it's never one thing. And in this case, it seems that was the case as well.
Yeah, it's interesting how much this reminds me of a Great Lakes shipwreck in general, like with the way it plays out.
Like many of those, it's a very unsatisfying, investigation. We don't have a lot of answers, and there's really not a lot of other stuff. I didn't really have a chance to scan through newspapers about this to see if there were even stories about it. But yeah, really outside of the report, I struggled to find anything about this incident at all. And I think that, that happens pretty often when it's a smaller vessel, a smaller crew. In this case, this is quite a long time ago. This is almost 30 years ago. So yeah, a bit unsatisfying, but like
sort of like, if the book The Perfect Storm hadn't been written, who would know anything about like the Andrea Gale and
that's
all of
true.
That it's on par with something like that. I feel like that it's just one of those tragic things that happens in maritime history, and it's more or less like everyone just keeps moving on.
That's the way it goes. So yeah, I think unless you have any other final thoughts.
No, I think I didn't pre-read anything on this one, so I wasn't expecting. I just wasn't expecting it to remind me of the Great Lakes so much, I guess, is my final thought on this one. That I guess anytime you're carrying bulk cargo like that in one big hold, it is pretty scary how you can take on that much water and not know. Unless you have systems in place to monitor that. Like, That is pretty terrifying. And the fact that, like we've said multiple times here, like everything's okay until it isn't. It's very much like a plane crash in a lot of ways.
And that actually reminds me that there is still the recommendations I forgot to include here. One of them being about alarms. So one of the things that the report advocated for was the fitting of hold bilge alarms in all single hold vessels.
I mean, to me, that's something that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so like you said, like it's nearly impossible to visually see that these holds are flooding until it is high enough that it doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
Another one being to introduce a formal audit procedure that will lead to a better understanding and closer monitoring of the relationship between the Belize Flag State Authority and classification societies charged with carrying out surveys of Belize registered ships. So maybe thinking that maybe these guys are a little bit too closely intertwined. Maybe some things are getting exempted and passed on that shouldn't be. We should not be giving out lifeboat exemption certificates.
Yeah, bad.
Another is the re-emphasis to owners of the need to comply with, all of the relevant conventions on safety and training and watchkeeping and things like that. And the final one is to advocate for the introduction of voyage data recorders in all vessels above 100 gross tons to remove the uncertainties when investigating marine accidents so that the correct recommendations can be made to improve safety at sea and preserve the lives of seafarers. So basically, I mean, all I think fairly common sense stuff. And again, this was almost 30 years ago, so I'm sure in a much wider scale, a lot of these things have been implemented.
Right. Yeah.
But still, I know a lot of smaller vessels don't have, a voyage data recorder.
Yeah, it is interesting seeing the differences between like these smaller vessels and the super carriers and stuff like that.
So with that, I think I'm finally done with that. So yeah, I mean, I did learn a good bit from this episode. I wish we had a bit more information to cover, but
it is always a little unsatisfying when that information isn't there. But I think it's also cool when you can share a story that doesn't have a lot of information out there about it, because that's how we find out more things.
So with that, I guess we'll wrap things up here. So if you have listened to this, thank you very much for listening and continuing to listen to the show. If this is your first time listening to the show, most of our episodes have a slightly more satisfying ending to them.
Some of them don't.
Yeah, plenty of them don't. I mean, there's plenty that don't really have an answer.
But if you want to be satisfied, sign up for the Patreon.
We will satisfy you over on Patreon for sure. So with that, we will take off here. Thanks again for listening, and we will talk to you again soon.